All right, welcome to the regular meeting of council for Tuesday, October the 6th. I'll call the meeting to order and look to the agenda. Are there any changes, additions to the agenda?
Can you see me, Mayor Borman?
Yeah, I can see you now, Ms. DeSoto.
Okay, yes, Mayor Borman, administration would like to add an in-camera item, L1, regarding the Recreation Services Agreement negotiation.
Great, no other changes?
None from admin.
Okay, with that, I'll move the agenda be approved as amended. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Looking then to the minutes of the September 1st meeting, regular meeting of council, are there errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move the minutes be adopted as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And looking to the minutes of the September 8th special meeting of council, are there errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move the minutes be approved as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We're moving on to business then, item G1, the land use bylaw amendment 2020-14, Bow River setback. Mr. Fish.
Good morning, Mayor and members of council. Thank you. Just confirming, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet, sorry.
I can see you.
See if we can improve the view.
Yeah.
There we are.
And are you doing some screen sharing? Yeah, there you go.
I am trying here.
Okay, we've got it. Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, thank you very much. So bylaw 2020-14 is a direct control district proposed amendment to the land use bylaw in the Van Horne area. So it's been titled the Van Horne Direct Control District. And more about that as we go. So it's a direct control district, so it only applies to a limited area, in this case 7 lots in Van Horne. So it's basically lots 10 through 18 with a few gaps in the numbers there. It's a little confusing because the bylaw itself talks about the legal descriptions of the properties, which are different from the civic addresses that you can see here. So this map and the map in the bylaw show the civic addresses. So starting from the bottom right, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, and 18, which are slightly different than the legal numbers, but they all correspond. So you can see where there's been properties developed, 2 to the north and 3 at the south end, leaving 2 vacant lots, 13 and 15 here in the middle. And so those ones are highlighted here. The key thing is that at the time of development, 60-meter setback was roughly established for lots from the Bow River based on policy in the Municipal Development Plan. We'll talk to that more detail in just a moment, but you can see the 5 lots generally follow that setback. So looking back at the timeline, in 1996 is when the original subdivision was registered, and construction sort of proceeded over the next roughly 10 years at various points with those 5 lots. Shortly thereafter, after the original subdivision in 1998, the new MDP, at that time new MDP was approved, and it talked about setbacks in growth areas being 60 meters from the Bow River. There was a map in the MDP. It didn't show this as a future growth area, so it's a little unclear to administration exactly the basis of those rules, but I think this was considered a new area, and so the 60-meter setback was applied. We can see this specifically in 1999 when a development permit was approved for one of the 5 lots, specifically allowing a small variance of 1 and 2 meters for different aspects of the house to encroach into the 60-meter setback. So that sort of gives us some window on the clear establishment of the 60-meter setback. 1999, we got a new land use bylaw, and it had similar language around the 60-meter setback. Finally, in 2005, I believe it was the 5th of the 5 properties was built. There was no development permit. There was just a building permit. And the survey from that development talked about a 60-meter setback as well. And the quote was based on data provided by the town of Canmore. So I think that's primarily around where the 60 meters was measured from, but that also gives us some indication. In I believe it was actually adopted in 2012, but Land Use Bylaw 22-2010 provided a bit more clarity on what those new neighborhoods were. And it established a date of September 22nd, 1998. So any subdivision after that would require the 60-meter setback. And then the current land use bylaw has similar wording with that September 1998 date. Moving ahead to 2019, the planning department received an inquiry regarding the development potential on the vacant lots 13 and 15 from the previous map. And because those lots were registered in 96, in other words, before 1998, it was felt that they are not subject to the 60-meter setback, only the 7.5-meter rear yard setback. Neighbors became aware of this and they were concerned that if they had been held to a 60-meter setback, it would be fair and consistent if others were. So neighbors have brought forward the proposed amendment bylaw. So looking in more detail at the bylaw, it's primarily to establish that 60-meter setback. It only applies to the 7 properties, as I mentioned. It is generally similar. It's largely based on the A1 district with some changes. So the purpose statement is more specific about applying just to these lots. As well, there are some minor changes to the uses. You can see that detached dwellings have been added as a permitted use instead of discretionary, and they've removed the detached dwelling with accessory dwelling unit from the permitted uses. So that is a change from council direction in the R1 district, but does sort of follow the history of the area as an R1 district. It does certainly still allow for accessory dwelling units as permitted uses, but wouldn't require it to go through the development permit process if someone were to build just a single detached. Finally, a couple of other small changes. Administrative sales office and logging operation have been removed. Those don't really apply in an already established neighborhood. Common amenity housing has been removed or has been proposed to be removed. That's at the applicant's suggestion. There's some slight changes to the regulations. This is sort of reflective of the lots being larger than sort of standard lots throughout town. It seems sort of silly to put in a minimum lot area, sorry, a maximum lot area when all of the lots in this subject of this bylaw are already larger than that. So some small changes to the minimum, maximum lot sizes and lot widths. The last change.
Did you take questions during the presentation, or
Well, it's not a question. Can everybody hear him? Because I'm in the Civic Center and Alaric.
Yeah, he's breaking up a bit, but I can understand him perfectly.
Okay,
well.
I'm not hearing all the words, so that's why I'm asking the question. I will on through.
Okay, I will try and speak louder and more clearly, see if that helps. And in the future, I'll try and get some additional resources to have a microphone.
It's way better now. I don't know what changed from now and like 60 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Where was I? So I guess I would prefer to run through these and then we can come back and answer some questions if possible. But if there's, we'll leave that to
go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the big change at the bottom of this one is it clearly establishes the minimum rear yard setback as 60 meters from the southwest bank of the Bow River. I think I've talked about that, and we'll touch on that again briefly in a moment. Two other small changes at the end. As a direct control district, Development Authority defaults to council. I don't think anyone has that as their objective, so it just clearly states that the development officer or potentially Canmore Planning Commission would be the development authority, as well as it limits the variance powers of the development authority related to the setbacks. So just a quick visual representation. This is an image that was provided by the applicant and shows potential building footprints. You can see these two dark gray areas here are the potential areas, but also they show that the footprint could be accommodated within the 60-meter setback, which they show very roughly as this blue line here measured from the bank of the river here. The green lines are what they're showing as the viewscape and potential impact from one of the adjacent properties here. Just zooming in on that image just a little bit, I mentioned there's the potential footprints of buildings at the 7.5 meter setback, and you can see that relative to the other areas. So there would be a potential impact on neighbors, on views. It's worth noting that views are not protected in the land use bylaw. There is an expectation of sort of uniform setback applied throughout a neighborhood. And so there's some question about consistency in how a neighborhood would develop. One other quick note is that the municipal development plan directs reference to the provincial document stepping back from the water when when determining setbacks. It's a fairly large document, but quick summary is there's lots of factors and benefits that can accrue from being set back from the water, but it's complex. It depends on the types of soils, the type of shoreline in the river, the riparian area, infiltration in that area. So given that complexity, the conclusion of this fairly large document says that they should be determined on a case-by-case basis. In this case, there has been no professional assessment of the proposed setbacks one way or another, but I mentioned it now just because it is in the MDP reference to looking at that. So in summary, 60-meter setback was clearly applied during period of initial development, especially after the 1998 MDP was implemented. Documents have evolved over the last 25 years, and as a result, there's sort of the potential for this inconsistent setback regulation to be applied. There's no certainty. There's no guarantee that setbacks won't change over time. So there's no guarantees of that in the bylaw, or things can change as we go forward. But basically, understanding that there should be some consistency when possible, administration is supportive of first reading for the amendment as proposed and recommend scheduling a public hearing for Tuesday, November 3rd. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I just have a question. I have a couple of questions, but the very last slide, almost last slide that you had up, referencing our, that one, the MDP there. So that's in the town of Canmore MDP that setbacks should be determined on a case-by-case basis by a person or persons qualified to make these assessments.
Sorry, only the first bullet.
Okay, only the first, got it.
The other two, the second bullet is sort of my summary of 70 pages, and included in that is the quote at the end.
Yeah, no, that's great. I misunderstood. I thought all those three bullets were in the MDP. Thanks. So a couple of other questions just to make sure I understand the situation. the lots that are currently developed, they were consistent, were they consistent with the land use bylaw in place at the time they were developed?
Yes, there was, as I noted, there was a variance for 11 Van Horne. So there is a very small portion of the building that encroaches
Right.
2 meters.
Which was.
Generally, they were.
Yeah. And I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this question, but I want to understand what rights, if any, of the owners of the 2 vacant lots have at this time in regards to a setback line to be applied to the lots, given there was, well, it spans a couple of decades and many changes to land use bylaws and other guiding documents. Can you give a definitive position on what their current legal rights are in regards to a setback?
Yeah, bylaws change. They are allowed to change over time, but there is a mandated process under which bylaws can change. So public hearing, notification, the opportunity to address council on these issues. So there is a process to change the bylaw, and that's what we're going through now. I don't believe there's any right that they have to prevent any change in the neighborhood, and we see that in with the new land use bylaw. There were a number of changes applied to a number of districts. So bylaws can change as long as they follow that process.
Great, thanks for that. Another question I have around the wording in the district itself, and I have a couple of small amendments to bring forward in regards to them. But in the Schedule A of the bylaw, section 14.39.4.1 states the minimum lot area shall be 1,200 square meters. And then further in the bylaw at 14.39.4.11, talking about maximum gross floor area, it notes residential buildings shall not exceed 325 square meters for lots smaller than 930 square meters. Given there can't be any lots at smaller than 930 square meters as a result of 4.1, I think that clause is an appendix. We can cut it out. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I don't have any concerns with that. We were just trying to follow the R1 or the wording that applies to maximum house size throughout the town, but agreed, it doesn't really make sense. None of these lots are smaller than 1,200 square meters right now. So,
and into the same in the same context, the next note in that section 1439.411B also references lots of 930 square meters. So I'll move to amend that to read 1,200 square meters. And that's in regards to the 0.35 FARs for lots greater than 1,200 square meters.
okay. Yeah, administration has no concerns with that, as I understand it.
Great. Are there questions from other members of council for Mr. Fish? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Thank you, Mr. Fish, for your presentation. I do have a couple of questions. So am I to understand that the application that's coming forward is not the landowner themselves, but somebody else? Sorry, let me rewind that. So the majority of this neighborhood is built out. There's just a few lots remaining. So the DC is being brought forward by somebody that doesn't necessarily own lot 13 and 15?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. I'm just took me a while to figure that one out. And when in crafting the DC, the draft DC district, was it administration that brought forward the changes to permitted and discretionary uses, or was that the applicants?
That was the applicant.
Okay, and so, and then lot size was discussed. So is the maximum size, so the two lots in 13 and 15, those two lots, are they larger than 1,200 square meters?
Yes, the smallest lot of the 5 is 1,202 square meters or thereabouts. And I can't remember, that might be 13. Lot 13 is getting close to the 1,200.
All right, so the purpose of this amendment isn't to encourage lot assembly between the two of them. It's just to correct it to the area. It's just to align the square footage to that actual what's built there. Is that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. All right. And so, and I tried to go through the historical piece. It was much easier hearing you tell the story actually than reading it. So basically all of those neighbors on that road, if they, that whole development at this point, or sorry, lots 10 to 18 at this point would, didn't actually have to adhere to the 60-meter setback. Is that correct? Because they were subdivided before 98?
So
I understand that correctly?
That clarity didn't come out until I believe it was 2012 that established the 1998 date. So the 5 properties that have been developed generally did follow that 60-meter setback. Certainly
They didn't have to, and they didn't, clearly some of them must not have realized it at the time of development.
Sorry, so they did have to follow the 60-meter setback.
Okay.
And the clearly because the development permit for property 11 specifically granted a variance to the 60-meter setback in the municipal development plan. So the developed properties, certainly 4 out of the 5, had to follow a 60-meter setback. That's, yeah. Because they were developed after, as far as I can tell in our records, they were developed after the 1998 MDP that established a 60-meter setback in new neighborhoods. The MDP was later clarified to say new neighborhoods are ones after September 1998. So by that time, these properties had been developed. And so I don't think there was the full awareness of the change when that date was established, that it effectively changed the setback in this area.
So it changed the setback in the area, but it doesn't apply to 13 and 15. This is all about lots 13 and 15, basically. So.
Correct.
I don't understand. I'm missing something. So everybody knew in 1990, were these not subdivided at that point? Or were they already subdivided and the other lots hadn't been subdivided in 98?
A little bit confusing because this had been 2 lots that were consolidated. I believe this had been 3 lots that were consolidated in some form. So it's a confusing area, as we can see.
Yeah.
In part here, you can see 4 of the lots are the original 1996 development
plan. Yeah.
One of them was in 1999, and then 2 of them were created in 2001. So there has been a little bit of history, although all of the lots were originally registered in 1996, but then amended. So, I mean, the short summary is that these 5 properties were basically held to the 60-meter setback. That 60-meter setback now wouldn't apply to lots 15 and 13, sorry, to civic address 13 and 15 Van Horne, because they have the subdivision number of
It's
1996.
99, 96. Okay, all right.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thanks. Right. Sorry, it took me a while to get there.
That's okay. No, it's
There's a
confusing.
lot going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's clear as mud. Are there other
Took me a while
questions?
to figure out what the end goal was with the subdivision.
Well, it's
Figured
like
it
following the bouncing ball. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you, Mr. Fish, for your presentation. I think what I'm understanding is that some of the language changed and the MDP now refers to a document without referring to specific numbers anymore. Is that correct?
Well, the MDP,
Didn't the MDP used to say 60 meters? I thought it said something like subdivisions before 1997 had to have a 60-meter setback, but they could apply for a 5-meter variance. Because I think we saw this come up quite a bit in SDAB, where people applied for the 5-meter variance because there was a very specific 60-meter setback number.
so that's correct. That was actually a 20-meter creek setback.
For creek setback, okay.
And so that applies to all water bodies, not specifically the Bow River. The 60-meter setback only applies to the Bow River.
Okay.
And it doesn't have it around the Bow River. There's no 5-meter variance wording in place. And the 20-meter setback would be well back from, I mean, these properties arguably still have to follow the 20-meter setback, but it's much closer than the rear yard setback.
Okay, so, but the language has changed now from the MDP that
So
Only
what
requires
changed
7.5
is
meters?
that the clarity in the MDP. So it used to say, sorry, I'm just trying to go back through the document here. So in the MDP, it used to say future growth areas, a 60-meter building setback shall be required. The thing that changed is this term future growth areas is somewhat relative. So in 1950, most of Canmore was undeveloped and future growth areas was everything. But now established neighborhoods are in the future growth areas. So in an effort to define what is future and what isn't, the wording now is that residential subdivision established after September 22nd, 1998 are so-called new neighborhoods and then need to follow the 60-meter setback.
okay. Thank you.
This particular subdivision was created before September 22nd, 98. So it's still the rules that were in place before this land use bylaw would then hold true.
That's correct.
Any other questions this time from members of council? Seeing none, thanks for your presentation. So at this time, I will move that council give first reading to the land use bylaw amendment 2020-14, Bow River setback, and schedule a public hearing for November the 3rd, 2020. And I'll move to amend the bylaw. And I think Ms. Hyde has the amendments to put on the overhead. Are you there, Ms. Hyde? I don't know if she's there. Okay, well, she doesn't have them put on the over. Oh, here we go. If you could just make that a little bit bigger, if possible. So I'll move that section 14.39.4.11A be deleted. And the reasoning for that is the section is unnecessary, given that section 14.39.4.1 states that the minimum lot area shall be 1,200 square meters. Is there a discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor to the amending motion? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And also just to tidy up that section, I'll move that section 14.39.4.11B be amended by striking 930 square meters and replacing that with 1,200 square meters. And again, the rationale is that in section 14.39.4.1, it's already been established that the minimum lot area is 1,200 square meters. Is there a discussion on that amending motion? So now I'll call the question on the amendment. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Councillor Sanford, are you there? Or oh yeah, do you have a question? No. Okay. So
I was voting.
I think your screen is freezing from time to time. Hand up after the vote. Doesn't matter. So we're back to the primary motion as amended. The council give first reading land use bylaw amendment 2020-14, Bow River setback, and schedule a public hearing for November 3rd, 2020. Discussion on that motion. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barnum. I will be pleased to give this first reading. I will be interested to see what comes up at the public hearing in terms of comments from the landowners as well as comments from the neighbors. I am curious as to why there are these changes to permitted and discretionary uses within the direct control district, as this is just fresh direction from council in the last 2 years. But I'll let the applicants speak to that when they come to the public hearing. So I will be happy to give this first reading.
Yeah, I too will support the motion. It's a bit complicated, this particular piece of work, but I think it's important to allow the direction to get to a public hearing and hear from the public on the suggestion of creating a DC district in that neighborhood. Other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. That will move on to item G2. Land use bylaw amendment 2020-15. Replacement of Teepee Town or TPT-CR, Teepee Town Comprehensive Redevelopment District. Mr. Gravel.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Just give me a second to share my screen. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
All right. Okay, I am just going to begin where I left off at our previous meeting, which was administration's recommendation. Given the amendments to the TPT-CR district aligned with the Teepee Town ARP, administration recommends that council give bylaw 2020-15 second and third reading. I understand from a procedural standpoint, before council can give the bylaw second and third reading, council must vote to take the postponement motion made at the September 8th meeting off the table. The exact wording for that motion is up on the slide, number 1. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
I have no questions. Are there any questions regarding the tabling motion and the procedure that we should follow? See none. Thanks very much. So I will move the council take postpone motion 201-2020 from the table. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? For some reason, Councillor Sanford's video is slow. So that was motion. That motion was carried unanimously. And that results in having the the bylaw back on the table for discussion. The motion was to give it second reading. So that's Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2020-15, the replacement of TPT-CR, Teepee Town Comprehensive Redevelopment District. The motion to give it second reading is on the table. Is there discussion to that motion? Councillor Hillstad?
Just like to propose an amendment to the bylaw.
Yeah.
Be coming.
Great, thank you.
So the amendment's on the screen. Basically, just amendment would be to allow for decorative forms of concrete, such as stamped pavers. Pavers stamped, stained, exposed aggregate, dyed and or cut concrete may be permitted for use on driveway, and cut concrete may be permitted for use as a border. So this is just one of the things that we heard at the public hearing. To me, it's more of a personal preference type thing, just for what is considered nice to look at. In my mind, concrete and can be done in a nice way. So I feel like this is a good thing to bring to amend, just to give us a few more options if driveways are to be allowed in those certain areas. They just have to look nice, and I feel that this addresses that.
Great, thanks for putting that up for discussion. So what are you thinking in regards to discretion? So how would the Development Authority, what sort of discretion would you expect the Development Authority to apply in this case? And what would be the yardstick or the guidelines that Development Authority would look to?
Again, that's probably going to be, probably depends on which person is viewing it. It'll probably be on what they consider. I'm sure if someone brought forward something that was very plain, again, that's the discretion of the Development Authority. So it's hard to say. It's discretion. So
I'm reading your amendment to suggest that whatever form of concrete would be used should be attractive, decorative in some way.
yeah, and generally with things like pavers or stamped or stained, like it is more decorative. So within the bylaws, it is now with the current one, they have a picture. Let me get to it. And it's of concrete pavers, and so that so it's just something like that. So like with the stamped and the stained, there's lots of areas around town where they have stamped concrete and it looks more like stone, exposed to aggregate. Again, it's just different styles, and again, a bit of personal preference, but yeah. So there's the example within the bylaw already for the pavers, and so to me, it's a attractive driveway.
Great. Sure. So to your amending motion, I'll be happy to support the amendment. I personally have not had any. I've always felt that decorative concrete would make a good material to be used for the driveway. So I'm quite supportive of this change, and I appreciate discretion of Development Authority is kind of gray, but we always have to depend on Development Authority using their discretion in a number of ways. So I'll support the amending motion. So other discussion on the amendment, Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Well, I appreciate where Councillor Hillstad's coming from. I don't think I'll be able to support this amendment, partially because the discretion is not actually being described. So before the applicant even comes into the planning office, there's already some subjectiveness that's being pushed into the bylaw that won't allow for there to be a clear understanding as to what's expected when they walk in the door. I know we hear from the development industry quite a bit that the subjectiveness of what we're asking for is sometimes a real problem or a point of contention when sitting with the planning department trying to imagine new developments in our town. And so some more clarity would have been appreciated. As you asked, what is the discretion? And it's fairly much basically up to the opinion of each individual planning officer. And that doesn't seem particularly fair for the planning officer or for the applicant. So I won't be able to.
Just a question for you, Councillor McCallum, if you're supportive of the direction or the intent and just disagreed with the wording around discretion, you could propose an amendment to the amendment to remove that.
I'm actually happy with the way it's written, but this, I think it makes it almost tougher. And normally I would amend an amendment, you know that, but in this case, I didn't have a chance to see it come in advance for today. I didn't know it was coming, and so I'm not prepared to make an amendment on the fly.
Councillor Mara?
Sorry about that. I would like to support this motion or amendment, but I would like to make an amendment to the amendment removing discretion. Because I've gone around and looked at many forms of concrete, and I have seen the stamped, I have seen the exposed aggregate and the dyed, and it's very attractive in many neighborhoods, not only here, I've looked in different communities, and I find it attractive. So I don't see it as a deterrent or something that's not appealing. I think it can add character to the area. So I would like to amend, take out the word discretion and say, I don't know if I would put in allow decorative forms of concrete instead. And
I think that sentence could just start with decorative forms. So rather than at the discretion of the development authority, if you strike that, that sentence would just read decorative forms of concrete such as pavers, stampers, et cetera, may be permitted.
That would be good.
So is there discussion on Councillor Mayor's amendment to the amendment? Councillor Hillstead, do you have a?
I fully support that. The reason that I had the discretion at the development authority was just that was some of the wording that was currently within the bylaw. Just it said materials used in the driveway do not include concrete, asphalt, gravel, or similar materials. Materials shall be of higher quality as shown. For example, in figure 3.18.3-1, concrete pavers may be permitted for use on the driveway, and cut concrete may be permitted for use as a border at the discretion of the development authority. So that's the only reason the discretion of the development authority was in there, just to keep it consistent with what was already in the bylaw. So, but I have no problem with that amendment. I fully support that.
Yeah, I'll support Councillor Mayor's amendment to the amendment as well. In the original amending motion from Councillor Hillstead, it was the uncertainty of the discretion, how that would be applied that I paused with, recognizing, as I said earlier, that we depend regularly on development authorities using discretion, but I think this is more clear and allows for more certainty, so I'll support Councillor Mayor's amending motion. Councillor Seeley.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I too will support this. It makes it clear. I don't think it needs discretion. It's clear the way it is by removing that.
Further discussion on Councillor Mayor's amending motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. So this is only a vote on Councillor Mayor's amendment, which is highlighted on the screen right now. So those in favor of Councillor Mayor's amending motion? Unopposed? Motion's carried with Councillor McCallum in opposition. Then we're back to the original amending motion of Councillor Hillstead's as amended. Is there discussion, further discussion on that amendment? Councillor Seeley?
I will support this amendment. I considered bringing one very similar forward. I think the intent is to improve the neighborhood, and this dresses it up. It gives some variety and choice, and I like it.
Great. Is there other discussion on Councillor Hillstead's amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried with Councillor McCallum in opposition. That takes us back to second reading then to, so the motion then is to give second reading land use bylaw amendment 2020-15 as amended. Is there further discussion on the motion at second reading? Any other proposed amendments? Councillor McCallum?
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I have an amendment prepared that administration has in their MIT.
Okay, we'll just wait to see that.
Sorry, Councillor McCallum, I don't have your amending motion to put on the screen.
Okay, Lauren and I made this, I think it was like 10 days ago, we determined that it was the right one, or a week ago. So I thought that it's maybe my mistake. I thought it would automatically be forwarded to you. My apologies.
But my apologies, I don't have it ready to put on the screen.
Let me see if I can find it. Hold on.
There, and could you email it to me quickly?
Ms. Hyde, you're hard to hear.
Oh, I'm sorry, let me turn myself up.
Thank you. Councillor McCallum,
I found it. 1 second. Hold on. I'll just send it to her.
okay, so Councillor McCallum saying that to you, Ms. Hyde, you could share it with your screen sharing as soon as you get it.
Yes, I will share it as soon as I get it.
It's on its way.
Whoosh. I will be one minute here. Here we go.
Here we go. Councillor McCallum.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I would like to propose a change to 3.18.4.22, which I need to find on my, where am I here? 4.22. Jeepers, I'm in the wrong section. There we go. So it is to add under use-specific regulation, the maximum density for tourist home units shall be 1 unit per 570 square meters of lot area, which is a typical building lot that you would put a 3 or 4 plex unit on. This is specific to 2nd Street. For the benefit of my colleagues and for the public. So as we heard in the public hearing, there are some residents, particularly on 2nd Street, that are concerned about the proliferation of tourist homes within their neighborhood. And in particular, that the far east block face has never really had commercial development before. So I think that it would be great to be able to moderate the level of impact that that the neighbors, the residential neighbors experience should there be tourist homes rented out. I think we understand that the purpose of a tourist home is basically it's a residential unit that some people can use as a short-term accommodation for visitors as they choose. But we are seeing more and more that that is the most common use is the tourist use and not necessarily the residential use. So I think that we all understand that this neighborhood is meant to still stay that a residential neighborhood with some touches of commercial. And I feel that this residential use actually has and can have a really heavy impact. So under the current proposed bylaw, those entire block faces could become all 4 of them tourist homes as a permitted use within the land use bylaw or within this proposed bylaw. So what I'm trying to do is to do a bit of mitigation, certainly allowing for that tourist home use per block, per parcel, but ensuring that it doesn't take over the entire building, which could have an effect of disrupting that sort of neighborhood feel that you have on 2nd Street. So that is my amendment that I am proposing.
Great, and it's assumed that the numbering would just be amended throughout the rest of that section.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And I'll be happy to support your amendment, Councillor. I think it does reassure the residents of the neighborhood that they won't be overwhelmed with tourist homes, and that there'll still be a reasonable amount of regular residential use, as per the longstanding wish that the neighborhood feel of Teepee Town is maintained. I think this is a good amendment. It allows for some of that commercial use as tourist home, but also reassures people that pure residential use will still be in prevalent use.
Yes.
So I'll support your amending motion. So the discussion to the amendment, Councillor Seeley.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I'll also support this amendment. I think it brings a good balance to the neighborhood. Important amendment, so I will support it.
Councillor Sanford.
I just had a question about that. So this is specific to Area C, is that correct?
Yes,
Because that's the only place that tourist homes are.
permitted, yes.
Now, how would this affect the existing sites that have multiple tourist homes on them?
I would guess they'd be legally non-conforming.
And then if they
Hear
were
from administration if I'm wrong.
Can administration speak on that?
That's correct. They would become legally non-conforming. They could continue to exist.
Okay.
This has
And
no effect on the current tourist homes that already have permits or are developed. It's really about moving forward and making sure, and in my mind, finding a balance between the wills, wish, and wants of the existing people and understanding how these developments sometimes actually operationalize after they're built, and the impacts that neighbors could feel as a result. So it's basically giving a little bit to each. Because I understand the tourist home zoning is a powerful financing tools for developers. So I don't want to take that away.
Yeah. And I think we heard that at the public hearing that people like the mix of tourist homes with residential homes.
Yes.
And I think this accomplishes that. So yes, I'll be happy to support your amendment. Thanks.
Councillor Seeley, you have a question?
I do. Just on that, what about existing applications that are coming forward or already in the hopper? How would those be impacted by this?
The new rules would apply to any application currently in process. So it's not when you apply for which rules are in effect. It's when a decision is made. So if council gave second and third reading to the bylaw today, any application that hasn't already received a development permit would be held to these rules. So they'd have to update their application to meet the new rules.
So there discussion on the amending motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question then on Councillor McCallum's amendment. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Bring us back again to the primary motion as amended. Are there other amendments to put on the table? Seeing none. Hard to believe we're coming to the end of this Teepee Town business. So then we have motion on table to give second reading to land use bylaw amendment 2020-15 as amended. Is there discussion on that motion? Further discussion on the motion? I'll speak in favor of, in support of the motion. It's been a long piece of work going back years, and I think we've heard quite a bit from the residents in Teepee Town, and I think this bylaw responds as best possible to the various different circumstances that are there. And I think this bylaw and the ARP recently approved will help define that neighborhood for the next 10 or 15 years or more. And Teepee Town will continue to be a really vibrant and important part of our community. So in giving this bylaw second reading and hopefully third, that we can move past this long conversations we've had and allow the redevelopment of Teepee Town to occur. Is there other discussion on the motion to give second reading? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And I'll then move the council give third reading to land use bylaw amendment 2020-15, the replacement of TPT-CR, Teepee Town Comprehensive Redevelopment District. Discussion on that motion. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to my colleagues for bringing this piece of bylaw to second reading. I would like to thank you all for entrusting this project to me and to the Teepee Town Task Force to really take a good look at it about 3 years ago. It has been, maybe it's 4 years actually. It's been a long road. This is a very important neighborhood. It's right in our valley bottom. It has access to amazing services. And it's a neighborhood that I really am looking forward to see how it grows and changes, because I truly believe that the potential within Teepee Town is to be a fully local neighborhood, vibrant, full of services and quiet, but adjacent to more vibrancy. I would like to thank the members of the Teepee Town Task Force that have helped shape the ARP and regulation to where it is today. And I would like to thank the residents of Teepee Town who come forward, who have emailed, stopped me on the street, called, shout outs. And I would like to thank administration for bringing forward a grant application a few weeks ago that shows that the work that we've done in this neighborhood is going to bear fruit for the neighborhood. There are proposed investments through these grant programs from the provincial government that I think will really make some change in the near term. So I'm happy and pleased and proud to support third reading of this regulation. And I wanted to thank everyone for the help in getting us here.
Very good. With that, I'll call the question on third reading. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Yippee. Nice to have that work done. I think administration will agree with me on that. Moving on then to item G3, road closure bylaw 2020-06. portion of Plan 931-2238. Ms. Wojtenko.
Hi, good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Great. I'm going to start my presentation. Okay, so this should be a quick presentation, I hope. I'm back again for second and third reading on Bylaw 2020-06, which is a road closure bylaw for a portion of Road Plan 931-2238. It's a 1.47 hectare portion of this road plan. And the purpose of the road closure is to dispose of the unused portions of this site to create titled land. And this is the area shown in the map. It is adjacent to the Holiday Inn and the Canmore Cemetery, and it's right adjacent to the Trans-Canada Highway. So back in December of last year, Council gave administration the direction to look at designing a fire hall for this site. There was also Council motion to consider putting affordable housing on the site as well. So we are looking at closing the entire portion of road for future use by the town of Canmore. The road closure bylaw process is governed by Section 22 of the Municipal Government Act. There's a number of steps involved, which is longer than the normal bylaw approval process. So we had to give first reading as well as have a public hearing. We needed to circulate this bylaw to Alberta Transportation and all the utility companies and wait for a formal response from all of those companies. We provided notification of the road closure in the newspaper. And then we sent everything off to the Minister of Alberta Transportation for approval, which we have received back from them. The road closure has been approved by the Minister. The rest of the process now is to get second and third reading of the bylaw by Council, and then we can go to land titles and register the road closure bylaw. So our recommendation today is that Council gives second and third reading to bylaw 2020-06.
Thanks very much.
Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions? Any questions for Ms. Wojtenko? I see none. Thanks very much for your presentation and previous presentations to this matter. I think we're all well familiar with the proposal. So at this time, I'll move that Council give second reading to road closure bylaw 2020-06, portion of Plan 931-2238. Is there a discussion on the motion? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I'd be happy to support second and third reading. I know we're just going to second reading right now of this road closure bylaw. This is one of the building blocks, the steps that we require to go through to get to the point of building our new fire hall, and I'm in full support of this. Thank you.
Great. Are there other comments, discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And I'll then move the Council give third reading to road closure bylaw 2020-06, portion of Plan 931-2238. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And with that, we'll move on to item G4, the Canmore Community Housing Corporation Construction Loan Guarantee Bylaw 2020-21. Ms. Richardson.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to share a brief presentation with you here. Perfect. Hopefully everyone is seeing that. So I'm here virtually before you today regarding a construction loan guarantee for Canmore Community Housing, Bylaw 2020-2021, or 21, sorry. Our recommendation is that council give first reading to Canmore Community Housing Corporation Construction Loan Guarantee Bylaw 2020-21. So Canmore Community Housing is moving forward with the intended construction of affordable housing on Lot 2, Block 1, Plan 191-1891 in the Peaks of Grassy neighborhood. And as you may recall, this site was transferred to CCH in 2019 for that purpose. Financing requirements are not expected to exceed $4 million, but in order to secure that financing, lending institutions are requiring a guarantee of up to 35% of those loaned funds from the town. So that would represent up to $1.4 million. And that guarantee will last until the units are sold and then the funds are repaid, or December 31st, 2022, whichever is earlier. And that's consistent with how we've approached these loan guarantees in the past. So just as an update as to where they are in this process with the project. So the builder and lender have not been selected yet. They have received and reviewed bids for the work. So the total construction budget has not been finalized, but the guarantee amount we're asking for today is based on the preliminary amounts based on what they've received. There is a fair amount of legislation with regards to these loan guarantees. So they must be done by bylaw, and that bylaw must contain certain specifics, and the bylaw must be advertised. And as usual, there's the petition period before we finally have that valid bylaw, which is why we're bringing forward this now to get this process started so that they can get that financing in place. So these are the timeframes we're looking at. So we're looking at first reading today. It will be advertised for in next week's paper and the following week as well. Then there's the 15-day petition period following that second advertisement. We'd be looking at second and third readings at the next council meeting following that, which will be the December council meeting. And then we'll have a valid bylaw by the end of December if everything goes according to plan. So these are the financial impacts to us as a town. So when we do issue these loan guarantees, they count towards our own debt limit. Based on our 2019 audited statements, our current debt limit is approximately $81.8 million. And when we look at all the debt we currently have outstanding, as well as debt we're committed to taking, that represents another that represents 40.7 of that 81.8. So when we look at a loan guarantee up to a maximum of 1.4 million, where before that guarantee, we're sitting at about 50% of our debt limit. And then with that loan guarantee, that would increase it by about a percentage point. So we'd be looking at 51% of our debt limit. And again, it's for a pretty short time period. The longest it would go is till the end of 2022. It's really just to get them through that construction cycle. So in conclusion, our recommendation is again that council give first reading to Canmore Community Housing Corporation Construction Loan Guarantee Bylaw 2020-21. And I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you very much. The only question I have is in regards to the period of 15 days that the public are given to provide comment. And going by the timeline that you've presented in the report, it would appear that that 15-day clock starts the day the second advertisement in the newspaper is printed. And I just want to understand how that, what the provincial direction is. I mean, arguably, somebody could only pick up the paper 6 days after it was printed and only see the notice then. And because we're moving forward with 15-day to November 6th, is there more specific direction in the provincial regulations, or is it not define where that clock, that 15-day clock starts?
Perhaps Ms. Hyde could help me with that interpretation if she is available behind the scenes there. I don't actually have my MGA with me currently, but I do believe that that is the specifics. I can't remember what section it is, but I do believe it specifies that that 15 days starts the date the second advertisement runs. So you're right, at any point during that week, somebody may become aware of it, but that is my understanding based on how these have happened in the past. But I see Ms. DeSoto has jumped to my rescue.
Ms. DeSoto.
Yeah, I would just like to remind council that that's the same timeline we use for all our debenture borrowing bylaws as well. So that has been our interpretation for a long time on when the clock starts, and it's immediately following the date of the second advertisement. Yes.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions, discussion with Ms. Richardson? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you, Ms. Richardson, for that explanation. If we do have the loan guarantee, we don't actually have to incur any debt. Is that correct? Although it goes against our debt limit.
Correct. So we have no servicing costs. It's just a guarantee of the financing. So in order to secure it, they do use the value of the land as well in order to secure that financing. And really the lender is just looking for a guarantee that should anything happen, that the town is supporting this project. And if CCH was no longer able to make the loan payments, only in that circumstance would we have any obligation. And again, the intent and how these have typically happened is in the past is as the units are sold, the debt is repaid. And so we're not incurring any debt servicing costs. It just counts against our limit because we've made that guarantee.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Councillor Mara?
Thank you, Ms. Richardson, for your presentation. I'm just confirming the date to be repaid by. Is it December 1st or 31st?
I think I miskeyed when I was typing, and I think it should be December 31st. It would be the end.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Are there other questions at this time? Seeing none, thanks very much, Ms. Richardson, for being here to present this. At this point, I will move the council give first reading to Canmore Community Housing Corporation Construction Loan Guarantee Bylaw 2020-21. And I will speak in support of the motion. This affordable housing project, or vital housing project now, is how CCH is referring to what used to be perpetually affordable housing. It's now being called vital housing. That project in Peaks of Grassy, as we all know, took many years to get to this point. It's been an important piece of work for the previous council and this council, and now CCH, the Housing Corporation, to bring forward. So this is one little piece of the puzzle, the financing guarantee, and I'll be happy to support this motion and help move that project forward and get it in the ground and get Canmore residents living in those units up in the peaks. So there's discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on then, item G5, Procedural Bylaw Amendment 2020-22, electronic meeting attendance. Ms. Hyde.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. So I have to present to council today a bylaw amendment that recommends changes to the procedural bylaw to address our electronic participation at council meetings, particularly once we return to live meetings. So moving our council meetings to an electronic platform, to Zoom, it was an emergency measure, obviously, and it was intended to be temporary. But now that we're using this technology, and given the situation in the world, even when we do go back to live meetings, I think it's reasonable to assume that there will always be an expectation that one of you or many of you would be able to join electronically for a live meeting, and also our staff members and members of the public that are presenting. And we are working on setting up technology in the council chamber to allow for this once we go back to live meetings. So in preparation for that, I thought it was good timing to just make a couple adjustments to the procedural bylaw so we're all clear about what kind of behavior we're expecting from ourselves and each other once we're making electronic attendance a permanent part of our procedures. So the first recommendation is that for voting members, so for you council, when you're participating in a council meeting, the suggestion or recommendation is that you be visible so that we understand that it's you who's attending, you're there for quorum, you're visible for the debate, and we can see your hands in the air when you vote. The second part of this is around let me look at this, the in-camera part. So this is kind of an honor system piece. So we're going to put it in the procedural bylaw so that we're all under the same understanding that when we're in an in-camera session, the onus is on each of us to make sure that that session is indeed in camera and that it's not audible to someone who shouldn't be in the session. So whether that's using your earphones, if you're at home, or whether that's being somewhere where you can be alone. So that is the other recommendation. And then the last one is just to put some just the intention in place about how members of the public will participate. So we've successfully had members of the public participating on this Zoom call. I just want to make it clear that they would have to register through my office so that we have some control over who is allowed in. And then of course, Mayor Borman, you as the chair have control over who's allowed to speak at any given time. So those are the recommendations. And I don't have a presentation, sorry. But I'm open to any questions and look forward to.
Great, thanks very much. You referenced the fact that the onus is on members of council, particularly when we're in camera, to be certain that there's nobody else in the area that can hear the meeting. And you suggested earphones, but the onus is also on us to be sure that nobody else can hear what we're saying. So just wearing earphones wouldn't accomplish that. We really have to be certain that when we're in camera, there's nobody else in the space or in the room within hearing distance of any of us while we're in camera.
I was just trying to include everyone. So for example, when I'm in an in-camera session, I don't typically, right? So it probably would be enough for me to just have the audible portion not there. But for people who are speaking, yeah, Mayor Borman, that's exactly the right way that it should go.
Right, thank you. Councillor Sanford, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Berman. A question for Ms. Hyde. When it, under 7.1.1, where it says that people should have the audio and video functions enabled and they should be visible. Now, who would those people be visible to? Will there be something broadcast in the council chambers, or would that be to the municipal clerk, or?
So you're talking about when we're live and someone is joining electronically?
Right.
That's where I'm a little out of my depth discussion in the IT portion of this, but we're installing something in council chambers that's called Zoom Rooms. And the intent of the Zoom Rooms technology is to allow exactly that. So from what I understand, the councillor joining would be visible on the screens that we're used to looking at for presentations. Not 100% sure how it looks. So if they're a little thumbnail and we see the main presentation, we'll have to practice once we get it. But the idea is that councillor would be visible through the entire meeting.
Okay, and then on our live stream, would they also be visible?
Yeah, the live stream, it'll work how it does now when we're in council chambers live. We're just adding that technology to that same camera that we use when we're in the chamber.
Okay, great, thank you.
So, are there questions for Ms. Hyde? Seeing none, thanks very much for the work and your presentation.
Thank you.
With that, then I will move the council give first reading to procedural bylaw amendment 2020-22, electronic meeting attendance. And I'll support the motion, and I will very much look forward to the day when we can actually run council meetings in person and with the combination of people being able to zoom in or come in through other means. But this is a good step to prepare us for for that eventuality, and I'm happy to support the motion. Other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Good thing side is in favor.
Mayor Foreman, it's 3 readings of the bylaw amendment.
Yeah,
You
that
just-
was first reading, wasn't it? That was first reading. And it was carried unanimously. I'll then move that council give second reading of procedural bylaw amendment 2020-22, electronic meeting attendance. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. And I'll seek leave from council, go to the third reading of the procedural bylaw amendment. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. And I'll then move the council give third reading of procedural bylaw amendment 2020-22, the electronic meeting attendance. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Moving on now to item H1, the election 2021 municipal election process approvals. Again, Ms. Hyde.
Thank you. So the 2021 election is just over a year away, which might seem sooner, might seem far away, but we are starting to prepare already. Those of you who've been on council before know that this is a traditional report that we bring at the when election season is starting to appoint the returning officer and get a few other approvals that are required under the Local Authorities Election Act. We're coming a little earlier than usual this time, mainly to accommodate a new requirement in the Act that we are going to start accepting candidate nominations on January 1 now. So instead of having one nomination day in September, how we're used to having it, we will be equipped to start accepting nominations on January 1, and then the deadline will be that nomination day that we're used to having 4 weeks before Election Day. So we just wanted to get the returning officer in place now so that we could prepare those materials and be ready to accept candidate nominations. And it's just really good timing to bring the other things forward as well, even though it's a bit far away. So we're also required to get your approval to have mail-in ballots, which are what the special ballots are called, to hold at least one advance election. As I say in my report, we intend to hold probably several more than that. And we just need also your approval in the event that we need to enter into agreements with the school board to help them run their trustee elections. That concludes my report. If you have any questions.
I have no questions. Councilor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. So I know here about the school trustee elections that if they decide to participate with the election, with the municipal election and align their ballots with ours, how does that work with other levels of government? Sorry, let me rewind. If they put a question on our ballot, they are helping to pay for the cost of the election itself. How does that work with other levels of government? So we've heard that the provincial government might be considering putting questions on lower levels of government's ballots. Would they be responsible for paying for a portion of the election as well, cost sharing?
That has not been shared with us yet. I've heard the same thing. The province is actually putting on a presentation, I guess, at the end of this week. So I'm hoping that there'll be some more information around whether what you're talking about is they're thinking about putting referendum questions on local municipality ballots at the time of the local authorities elections, because all the Alberta elections happen at the same time. So there's that as a vehicle to also get some of their questions on the ballot. I don't know if there's funding attached to that with the school boards. If that's part of your question, our agreement does provide for them to provide funding towards their election if we include their elections on our ballot.
And so will you, I'm guessing this is for clerks and ROs, this learning session that you're talking about, or?
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to know if the municipalities have the ability to decline the question on their ballot as well.
I feel like no, I think it's going to be an amendment to the Local Authorities Election Act itself. So I don't think there'll be an option for municipalities to include or exclude those questions. But we look forward to seeing the legislation, and you know, we should be receiving some further information from Alberta Municipal Affairs once everything's in place.
Great, thank you, Ms. Hyde.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Berman. Ms. Hyde, do we actually have the date of the next election?
We do. I think it's October 21st, Monday, October 21st.
Okay. So 21-21. 10-21-21. Are you available?
Councillor Sanford, I'm sorry, it's October 18th, Monday, October 18th.
Monday, October, so it's Monday, October 18th, and it's across the province. Every municipality in Alberta votes on the same day, correct? Are you able to answer questions of new candidates that might be interested in running in the election yet, or should they wait for, when do you think that information will be available?
Yeah, quite a few changes have been recently made to the Local Authorities Election Act, especially with respect to candidate funding. So how fundraising goes and how your financial disclosure will work. And it's super recent. So just even to give you some background, the previous government had made some extensive changes to this act, which we were just learning about last summer, really. And now a lot of those changes have themselves been changed again. So I think the province is really working hard this month to get the information out to returning officers and clerks so we can get that information prepared for candidates. So yes, I would say at this point, please stand by. We don't even have an updated nomination form yet from the province. I think they're probably scrambling to get the stuff together for us. But I would hope by the end of the month that we'll be able to answer questions about, particularly around your campaign contributions. There's some new rules around advertising, third-party advertising, and then what kind of disclosures you have to do after you've run.
Okay, so if people want to inquire, they should wait a little bit longer because all the information is not out yet.
That's correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Are there other questions at this time for Ms. Hyde? Seeing none, thanks again for doing this work and bringing the decision to council. I intend to put all three sections of the motion on the table at the same time. Does that work for all councillors? Anybody prefer to have them separated out? No. So then I will move that council appoint Cheryl Hyde, municipal clerk, as the returning officer for the 2021 municipal election. Appoint Therese Rogers, general manager of corporate services, as the substitute returning officer for the 2021 municipal election, and authorize the returning officer to provide a minimum of one advance vote, provide for special ballots for which application may be made in writing, by telephone, by fax, in person, by email, and by secure website, and enter into an agreement with Canadian Rockies Regional Division 12 and Christ the Redeemer Catholic Schools to conduct their election for school board trustees if required. Is there a discussion on these this motion? It's all pretty straightforward. I see no discussion. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And we'll move on now to item H2. Green Municipal Fund grant increase to the Renewable Energy Feasibility Study budget. Ms. Fournier. Morning.
Good morning, Mayor Borman and members of council. Can you guys see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I am here today with a request to enable us to receive an external grant for our renewable energy feasibility study. I will start the presentation and end the presentation with the recommendation from the staff report. I also have a couple of slides that provide some background on the project that I'm speaking about, which is the Renewable Energy Feasibility Study. I wanted to firstly make it clear that this is not a request for additional budget from the town of Canmore for the project. This is a procedural request that will enable us to take in and spend the money that we've been awarded from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Moving on to the background, during the 2020 capital budget amendment process, $60,000 was approved for climate action plan initiatives. 50,000 of that was for a renewable energy feasibility study. The other 10 was for an electric vehicle feasibility study on our town fleet. Within that 10, 5,000 was actual town of Canmore funding and 5,000 was funding from the Municipal Climate Change Action Center. I will be actually back in a couple of weeks at the October Committee of the Whole meeting to discuss the results and recommendations from that study as it is now complete. So stay tuned for that. With the renewable energy feasibility study, after that 50,000 was awarded or approved in last December, I started the process to look at how we could leverage that funding with external sources. Then a few weeks ago in September, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities contacted us with the good news via a letter to council that we'd been approved for matching funding from the Green Municipal Fund. The Green Municipal Fund is very particular about what they will fund and will not fund, and they have eligible and ineligible expenses. So the $42,050 is what they have deemed as the eligible component that they will match. So that's why there's not a 50,000 to 50,000 match there. The study itself is very important to the climate action plan work because it tackles the highest source of our greenhouse gas emissions. 60% of Canmore's greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings through grid electricity and natural gas consumption. The study will help us determine the degree to which we can look to renewables to help meet our greenhouse gas reduction targets. And really it is trying to inform the portion of our community energy consumption which can be met with renewable sources or low carbon sources. This study will identify, out of the myriad of different options that are out there, the most effective in terms of cost and greenhouse gas reduction impact, develop a short list, and within that short list, we can do a deep dive on the technical and financial feasibility and co-benefits of the ones that are most promising. So the grant from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is important because it allows us to increase the scope of the options that we can do that technical and financial feasibility analysis on. With that, I will conclude with the recommendation, which is that council approve an increase to the budget for climate action plan initiatives, cap 7156, from $60,000 to $102,050, with the $42,050 increase to be funded from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Green Municipal Fund. Thank you, and please let me know if you have questions.
Thanks very much. Indeed. Not to put you on the spot, but I wondered if you could give us just a bit of detail as to what the increased scope or the, in your report, you note that the funding will allow for more detailed study of additional technologies. So just, I'm really curious to know what additional information this will allow us to glean. Yeah,
for sure. So the portion that is ineligible from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is the pre-feasibility assessment. So that's the kind of triaging of different options. So the that component has been done over the last number of months and is in process, and we're doing a lot of engagement and consulting with experts to verify what we're thinking might be the most promising options. So the component that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities will match is to do that deep technical and financial analysis. And the intent is to give enough information so that we may be confident in making a decision to move forward or not move forward or do a pilot project or say, no, it's not worth it. So that level of analysis, will require a lot of funding, and it will require consulting support and engineering studies, whatnot. So there aren't, we can only include a few options in that component of the study. So some of the things that have risen to the top are things like a virtual power purchase agreement, where we would be importing green electricity from outside of Canmore's borders. So we can do that deep dive and really look at what that would cost, what the implications are, what the risks, the level of analysis on the load studies that we need. So that's kind of an example. Another one is district heating, for example, where a number of buildings in a neighborhood are heated through, it could be there's a number of sources that you could use. You could use natural gas, but through combined heat and power, which is much more efficient in some cases, or geo exchange, for example. So district heating is another one. Looking at combined heat and power potentially in one of our more energy consuming buildings is another one that's of interest. Increasing some solar options that we're looking at, including a solar canopy, or accelerating, looking at options to accelerate community solar uptake. So those are just some of the examples of the ones that we might want to do at the very deep level of analysis on. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It sounds like
it's interesting.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I guess it's safe to assume that we applied for this grant?
We did, yeah.
Right. Well, thank you to the FCM for supporting the town of Canmore in this way. And thank you for the work you've been doing to move forward with our climate action. And I'm happy to have this opportunity before council now to, as you say, do a deeper dive into the studies that are so very important in our community. Are there questions at this time from members of council for Ms. Fournier? Seeing none, thanks very much for bringing this report forward and for bringing in the grant.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I will move that council approve an increase to the budget for climate action plan initiatives. That's cap 7156 from $60,000 to $102,050, with the $42,050 increase to be funded from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Green Municipal Fund. Discussion on the motion. I will speak happily in support of the motion. This is very good news. Since we started working with real intent to address the climate change, I think the town of Canmore has been showing some leadership, particularly for a community our size, and it's certainly being noticed outside of the valley. It's important work to do, and we've talked about this quite a bit in previous meetings. I won't belabor the point, but I'm very happy to support this motion to extend the studies that will be done to address our GHG emissions. Other discussion or comment on the motion? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I too will support the motion. I think this is a good direction for the town. I'm especially interested in evaluating some of the emergent technologies because, that things come on the horizon and we're not really sure how good they are because they haven't really been tested, but there may be some opportunities here for us to look into some of the more future focused types of energy that we need to run our buildings and our community. So I think this is a really great time to do this. And thank you so much to Amy for applying for the grant and to FCM for awarding us with it. So I will be happy to support this motion.
Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. This time, we will be moving in camera, and if there are members of the public observing the meeting, just let you know that there are no other motions to come forward after we are finished with the in-camera session. So we won't be returning to the live stream after the in-camera session. With that, I will move the council take the meeting in camera to prevent the disclosure of information in accordance with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, specifically for item L1, information subject to legal privilege in accordance with section 27(1)(a). In regards to item L2, information regarding the town's contractual negotiations in accordance with section 25(1)(c)(3). Call the question on the motion. Those in favor? Opposed? We're in camera.